is always fascinating. But in this particular year, where we have 8 openings, where we have Jim Harbaugh in the mix, somewhere hanging around just after winning the national championship in college football, and now, oh, by the way, Bill Belichick, it's never been as fascinating as this. Did you tell me we have Mike Reese as well? Is Reese standing by? All right, he'll join us at 8:30, so we will go live to Foxborough. He is there in the building now for all of that. Teddy, I'll come back to you, because you said that you don't feel emotional. I'm not going to lie to you. You look a little emotional. You look as though this is, if nothing else, you're sort of still processing it. And I don't want to eulogize the man. He is very healthy, and he probably is going to be someone else's head coach next year. But I do still want to ask you the question this way. Someday when you are in your dotage and you have your grandchildren on your knee and they say to you, what was it like playing for Bill Belichick? What do you think the first thing you'll tell them will be?
Okay. Here's what it's like to play for Coach Belichick. I want you all to think of a wet towel, okay? You know a wet towel when it drips and what you try to do is get all of that water out of that wet towel. And how do you do it? You take both of your hands and you wring that towel over and over and over again, okay? That towel is the player. Bill Belichick are the hands that wring the water out. And the water is the talent of that player. Bill Belichick could get every drop of physical ability, mental ability, football playing ability out of you somehow, some way. And it didn't matter how he did it, it was going to happen. And if you were a player that wanted to win championships, that's exactly what you wanted. You wanted every ounce of ability to be wrung out of you somehow, some way, because the success of winning Super Bowls is what this game is all about. And that's what it was like to play for Bill Belichick.
That's extraordinarily well said. Look,
great analogy.
Again, D. Wood is nodding his head. Again, I mean, you were there for this in the early days of it.
Yeah, man. It gets a little emotional for me because, for me, early on in my career with Bill, I had a weight problem, okay? I had a weight problem. I knew I was extremely talented. I remember Bill came to me, man, in the offseason, my 3rd year. And Bill, had this whole program set up for me down in North Carolina. And checked in with me every week at this program for 2 months. Because he knew, dude, you're a talented guy, but you're wasting your talent because you're not handling your business. But he was willing to work with me. Everyone that talks about Bill, thinks he's so rigid. There's a whole other side to Bill. This dude behind the scenes, that man was personable, trying to help me through something that was anchoring my career. And when I went through that moment, I literally had the best year. I had the best year of my career after that. So when Teddy talks about the talent and that analogy, it literally rings true because I'm here. I can speak on it. I know what this man has done for me in my career, and that laid the foundation for the rest of my career, man. So,
he would push your buttons in an incredible way because I remember that season, Wood, and he had an anchor in the locker room. I believe he had a ship's anchor. In the locker room, and he talked about the entire team and how out of shape it was. This was early on. This might have been the 1st or 2nd year, but he told us about how much the anchor weighed. And then that anchor we're dragging around on the field.
Mike Reese, let me start with you. You were there at the facility. We have talked all week long. What can you tell us about how we arrived at where we are this morning?
Greeny, let me start with this. There are certain days that you come into this facility and it just feels different. The word to me is surreal. The only other time that I could compare to this is when Tom Brady announced that he was leaving the franchise. Just being in the facility, knowing that one of the pillars of their championship foundation will no longer be here, it sent a feeling to me around the organization that people are still processing here in the organization. And I know we talked about it, how this was probably what was going to be the end result. But there are still people in this building, players in that locker room that I've communicated with this morning that can't believe that this has happened, that they thought maybe there was a chance Bill could come back for another season, get the offense fixed. So there's just a whole processing here with everyone in New England over this major news that's unfolded.
Yeah, certainly understandable, and not just those, but you've heard it in the voices of Teddy Bruschi and Damian Woody and others, the people who've been around that organization. And I thought Dan Graziano made a really good and important point, because, Mike, you and I talked about this in very specific terms this week. Does Bill want to come back? Do the Patriots want to back? Will there be compensation? And in the end, the fact that the two men are going to hold this news conference together this afternoon, I think certainly signals to all of us that they were able to sit down and do this as amicably as possible. And I think that just feels like a good thing for everyone in the NFL.
Greeny, that was the first thing that stood out to me when I saw that there was a news conference, 12 o'clock Eastern time, in the team auditorium. So it's not in this room I'm standing in, which is the daily news conference room. They step it up to the team auditorium where the players meet, where we're in post-game, when it's much bigger. And it's not just owner Robert Kraft. It's Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick together, because they will forever be linked. And while goodbyes are hard after 24 years, they've come to a point where they feel comfortable standing together as they say this goodbye.
That's really well done, and obviously we'll look forward to your coverage all day. Let me bring Lewis in here. I'll repeat it again, Lewis. You played for Bill Belichick in Cleveland. The defensive coordinator was Nick Saban. Nick Saban yesterday announces his retirement after the most successful individual tenure in the history of college football at Alabama. And now here we are, less than 12 hours later, Bill Belichick after the most successful NFL coaching tenure in history. What are your thoughts this morning?
Yeah, I'll echo what Mike Reese just said. That's the first thing that I tweeted this morning when I decided to open up social media, which was, this is a surreal day. It's been a surreal 24 hours. Because, 30 years ago, in 1994, when I was playing for the Cleveland Browns, and these two guys were together and really just starting this journey of success that they have been on for the last 30 years. I was just a 24-year-old second-year player who was really just trying to find his way in the NFL and trying to learn the game at the ground level, and didn't really realize at the time that I was being taught by two of the grandmasters who were going to eventually have the kind of success that will never be duplicated, as Teddy Bruschi so eloquently stated. It will never be duplicated what these two did. And they were just getting started then. And look, it was always about just the consistency of your performance. And Nick talks about now about this whole thing about being process-oriented, and everyone takes that and runs with it as if it's something that just started, in 2024. They were talking about this back in 1994, about stop looking at the scoreboard, about constantly doing the types of things that would allow you to maximize your performance. And the next word that comes to my mind then is about accountability. They would never take their foot off of you as far as making sure that you were really dialed in on the details. And if you did, as Damian Woody mentioned, they'd let you have it now. They'd let you have it in front of everyone. And those are the kind of things that can really make grown men uncomfortable, especially young men who all consider themselves to be alphas, especially when you're around your peers, and he flips on the lights and now all of a sudden that pointer is being pointed at you, and he's talking to you in ways that really do make you uncomfortable and make you really question whether or not you want to commit yourself to the process the way in which those two in particular committed themselves to the process, not only then, but then for the next 30 years. I mean, you win 7 national titles, you win 6 Super Bowls, you go to 9, and Teddy talks about the fact that they could have won more than they even won, a play here, a play there, and they're setting records that no one could ever dream. For me personally, to be at the beginning of that journey, to have been a part of that at the very beginning, and not realizing then what they were going to achieve later on, when it comes full circle for me, and I talk to these two guys now, and I've talked to them both recently, I'll go so far as to say this, I don't think I've ever even mentioned this. When I was being considered, when I was in the running to be the general manager of the New York Giants, I talked to Nick. I asked Nick if he would leave college football. And would he come back to the NFL? Because I wanted to work with one of those two guys. And it never got to that point. But he took the call. We had the conversation. And then true to Nick Saban's form, he said, hey, look, how about you just get the job first and then we'll talk about it. But the fact of the matter is, that's the kind of respect that I had for them and that I have for both of them. And it's just a very surreal day, because I'll tell you what, we better all, sit back now and understand what we just witnessed and understand that these two guys will be talked about for eternity as far as how they started, how they adapted as their careers went on. The sustained success that they had is just absolutely sick. It really is. And we should all be just clamoring to get up next to them and try and take from them as much as we possibly can in terms of their knowledge and how they were able to sustain the level of success that they did. Because it's unprecedented, it'll never be duplicated.
This would be as if Vince Lombardi and Bear Bryant both retired within 24 hours of each other. That is what we're talking about. That is how these men will be remembered and talked about. Again, I don't want us to sound like we're eulogizing them. They're both young, healthy, vigorous people.
But that's part of the
Right.
greatness of them.
Right.
Is we, in part, it sounds like we're talking about them like they're no longer here with us.
Right.
But they absolutely are and are going to be, and it's because of their greatness. And we all know. Lewis said it great. Mike Reese said it great. Teddy, we all know. We're never going to see it again.
Yep.
And it's a day to appreciate it.
Bill Belichick's tenure as head coach of the Patriots represents more than 23% of the history of the NFL. The NFL is 103 years old, right? And he was there for 24. So think about that. Like that is a significant figure.
Yeah.
And we talk about everybody's hiring coaches. 8 teams are going to hire coaches, and fan bases are going to want to know offense, defense. They're going to want to know what people look at coaches and they criticize the clock management, right, and in-game strategy. Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, Pete Carroll. These guys are the programs that they're leaving. Like they built this, right? And the impact they had on the lot. You hear stories like Damian Woody and Teddy Bruschi and Louis Riddick are telling. I mean, I'm talking to people in the Seattle front office yesterday that are emotional because, I mean, these are people nobody even knows about.
Yeah.
That Pete Carroll had an impact on. That's going on today in Foxborough, as Mike Reese was saying. I'm sure it's going on in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The significance of these moves is just absolutely, I really don't think anybody watching has a full understanding of what kind of day this is in sports.
I would also say, I think it's a message to all of us that we have to start embracing greatness and living in the moment and enjoying it while it's here. Sure. Because all great things come to an end. And I'm on radio yesterday, and my stomach was in knots thinking about Nick Saban, and I'm asking myself, did I really embrace and enjoy Nick Saban the way I probably should have? Because we get caught up in the next thing, especially when we're in the media. Sometimes we don't really enjoy greatness the way we should. And when you hear it when you talk about LeBron and Patrick Mahomes, and we take those things for granted. But I just want everybody to, moving forward from the day, when we have greatness, enjoy it for what it is. Because while we're living, we're never going to see what we've seen from these two guys ever again. Right. Not in our lifetime.
Yeah, the term living legend is probably thrown around a little bit too easily. But the truth of the matter is, in both of these cases, and I do not mean to diminish Pete Carroll today either. I'm glad you mentioned him. A terrific coach and all of that. But in the cases of Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, certainly living legends, people who 50 years from now, when they write books about the history of the game, will be featured prominently. D. Wood, again, you had, for those who didn't hear your story earlier, it was emotional. It touched all of us. Yeah. And I think that there is a symmetry today with the Saban piece of it, to see these two legends at the same time making these decisions for obviously completely different reasons, we would assume.
Yeah, I don't know Nick Saban personally, but I feel like he's part of the family because he's part of that tree.
Yeah.
You know, the Parcells, Belichick, they're all a part of the same family. And I just, the things that Lewis was talking about, the process, the culture.
Yeah.
It's the culture. When you walk in that building, when I walked in that building in New England, like literally it was like game day every single day. You had to make sure that you had your mind ready going into that building, because if you didn't, you were going to get embarrassed. And so imagine that immense pressure every single day, day after day after day. Is it no surprise that Coach Belichick and the New England Patriots had the amount of success that they had over all those years when, as each individual players walk into that building feeling the same thing that I just described to you day after day?